So good afternoon for the final time. This is my favorite panel of the meeting. It's going to be a 1-hour analytical retrospective of the emceeing of the Grand Challenges meeting. It was a joke. In any case, I have 3 serious things to do. First, I want to introduce our panelists. Bill Gates, you know, co-chair of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. You also know Francis Collins because he just spoke in the previous panel. He is the director of the US National Institutes of Health. I'll do a little bit more on the people you may not know. Right here we have Arunachalam Muruganantham. I think that was close. He's the founder of Jayashree Industries. While working as a helper in a welding workshop, he observed that many women in rural areas still used clothes instead of sanitary napkins during their menstrual periods. He understood that the high cost of available sanitary napkins was keeping rural women from purchasing them, and he resolved to develop an alternative. The Jayashree Industries model helps offer livelihood, hygiene, dignity, and empowerment to underprivileged women all over the world. We also have Amy Smith, who is the founder and co-director of the D Lab at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. She designs cheap, practical fixes for challenging problems in developing countries. She received a MacArthur Genius Grant in 2004 and was the first woman to win the Lemelson MIT Prize for turning her ideas into inventions. She joined the Peace Corps for 4 years in Botswana, where she taught middle school in the Kalahari Desert, and then became the regional bookkeeping officer for the Okavango River Delta.
Beekeeping.
Finally, I'd like to introduce Sue Desmond-Hellmann, who is the still relatively new Chief Executive Officer of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I can tell you, however, that in her 4-6 months, however long she's been there, people are really excited and they really like her, and I think you will too. So, Sue Desmond-Hellmann.
Thank you, Jeremy. So here we are after a fantastic several days with a panel that's titled Creating Cultures of Innovation. And I want you to know that my fellow panel members and I are bound and determined not to have you leave cynical about another panel on innovation. We have 4 terrific people, and I want to just frame the discussion by doing 2 things, especially in light of this fantastic meeting about grand challenges. First, I want to start with a quote. I like quotes, and I wanted to look for a quote about innovation that I thought was consistent with this group, this panel, and our intentions. And it's a quote from J.K. Rowling. Imagination is not only the uniquely human capacity to envision that which is not, and therefore the foundation of all invention and innovation. In its arguably most transformative and revelatory capacity, it is the power that enables us to empathize with humans whose experiences we have never shared. I think that's what Grand Challenge is all about. Empathize with humans whose experiences we've never shared and use that imagination to do something transformative. So you've heard about the fantastic panelists we have now. The best innovations in my mind are innovations that make things happen, and everyone sitting on this stage has made things happen. So I'm going to start by calling on each of our panelists to answer a pretty simple question. How do you think about innovation? And specifically, how do you think about innovation so it matters? And I'll start with Bill Gates.
Great. Well, I think the industry I worked in before being full-time at the foundation has given people a little bit of an unrealistic view of how easy it is to do innovation. The idea that you can come up with new applications, make them downloadable, have feedback in a few months, be cycling versions over a period of a year, it's a wonderful thing. And in fact, we should leverage in every domain, including health delivery and government competence, those digital tools in very creative ways. But of course, the domain that we're all sitting here talking about is much more difficult. Inventing new drugs and vaccines, getting things out, getting them actually delivered, understanding the constraints of the environment that these things have to be delivered in. It's pretty daunting. And so it's great that we have examples where those challenges were overcome. I think one of the most interesting things when we came out with grand challenges to start with is a lot of scientists said, either A, I hadn't understood that was such an important problem, so now that you've framed it, I'll go work on it. Some said that they needed a real sense that new ideas would make a difference because they saw that there were new ideas that weren't being used, weren't being exploited, weren't, you know, if you have a rotavirus vaccine for the rich world and it's not even getting to the poor kids, then why come up with a new vaccine that you think should get to poor kids because you're not even taking the one you have and getting it out there. So is that really beneficial when the first dollar should go to that delivery? So the commitment that I think over the last decade that governments and philanthropy have been able to make, that there will be more resources pouring into these areas. And if the only constraint of getting things out to help the poorest is financial, some way or another, things with high impact, those problems will be solved. The other big thing about innovation in this space is getting lots of people to pay attention from different fields of endeavor. And there, our first set of challenges really didn't broaden the community all that much. We got people doing, some people doing rich world health, thinking about developing world health. But it's only later as we did the Grand Challenge explorations that I'd say we really opened it up and said, no matter where you are in your career, where you are in some hierarchy, where you are geographically, you know, we'll make this thing simple so you don't even have to call up the legal department so they can charge you $100,000 for your $100,000 grant. It's only then that we sort of, and even that took a while for us to figure out how to get the structure right so that almost anybody could sign up no matter where they were. Over time, you know, we should be better off. That is, there's more biologists, engineers, there's more digital tools to share this information out. We should be able to raise the awareness of what the unfinished agenda is in all these things. And even in the delivery space of, you know, how do you get primary healthcare systems working better? How do you get women's groups to create social demand for various products? You know, I think we are getting a lot smarter about those things. And so I do think the pace of innovation will go up. To some degree, we're going to have to defy the trend that's existed in rich world health, where the number of new things being approved is actually not increased over time, despite huge increases in resources going into net R&D in that space. But I really do think in global health, we will see over this next decade lots of innovations. And I do think every time we get an innovation that's a model, it encourages more people. So I see a lot of positive momentum here, you know, including a meeting like this one where just at the poster session last night, you know, I saw 5 or 6 things that, you know, got me very excited. And, you know, a lot of them were people who weren't working in global health 10 years ago.
That's terrific. Thanks, Bill. I think the concept of innovation and having a broad reach and bringing new people in to solve tough problems is a perfect setup for our next panel member. Arun, we heard from Jeremy about the exciting work that you've done. Help us understand how you see innovation, how you tackle product development and solving the problem that you did.
So unluckily, the moment you say innovation, many people, they feel it is an untouchable word. Why? Because the moment you say innovate, it is unknown. Something you are trying to do, an unknown thing. The moment you say you are trying to do an unknown thing, the probability is more for failure. That's why nobody is taking, nobody ever attempts to do innovation. So what I'm saying, you just put my slide. You see, I'm sitting with Mr. Gates. I'm an ordinary welder. What makes you sit here? I innovate a machine you see on the bottom of that slide. Across the world, the hygiene domain, the sanitary towels is monopolied by multinational or transnational companies. That's why that the product what they are producing is a little bit, the cost is higher side, it is unaffordable by a common woman. So I try to do innovation on the particular domain. I spend around 7.5 years. The complete funding is my own. Many times I used to sold my blood for transportation purpose. Instead of that, I did an innovation on the bottom of a simple machines. So in that machine, an uneducated woman can make at par to the quality what they are making in a big corporate. So out of it, what I did a simple re-engineering, but no one is ever encouraged me. Everyone thought I'm a mad, I am become a psycho, I'm useless. So then one point of time, the village people thought I am become a vampire, drinking girl's blood in the night time. Then they chase out. So with that struggle, I invent. Then even after inventing that, so even I am having an IPR right, intellectual property right, I never appoint any dealer distributor for this machine, because this is the only unique machine to make sanitary towels at low cost machine. You see the hot cake product. If I want to make money, I can make at least few billions in 10 years. I never did this. I supply the machine only in rural areas across India. So what is the problem? The moment you innovate some engineering product, you need to get certification from a renowned engineering college something. In my country, it is called Indian Institute of Technology. I sent the machine there. Then I saw some French-based engineers. Those days, if I saw somebody French-based a little bit afraid, I thought they're all genius. Because those days, I'm not able to speak this little English. In one corner, they are criticizing my machine. In other corner, I'm standing. But I'm able to understand what they are criticizing, but I'm not able to reply. That's why I'm very dare to say here, linguistic is no way connected with skills, practical skills. Because what they are criticizing, why this man took the life risk, he made some machine on wood, what is going to do with this? That means what is they are telling, how I am going to compete multinational companies with this simple equipment. So what I am saying, I am a son of a handloom weaver. Myself and my father, we bought a handloom weaving machine for $1,000. We installed in our small home. My father made sarees. We survived, myself, father, mother, 2 sisters, amid of 440 fully mechanized mill in my city. That means my father never used this simple equipment to rub shoulder with the mill owner. The same way I want to do this, my machine, I understood it is having a capability of creating a livelihood for women. I want to prove it. Then I send the machine to the remote part of India in Bihar. I think Bill knows very much about Bihar. Because anything you are succeed in Bihar state, very well you can replicate around the globe. It's very easy. Then I made it success. Now it is transforming millions of women. So far we transformed around 6 million women from unhygiene to hygiene domain. So this is the power of innovation. So don't get feared about doing innovation. Innovation is meant for everyone. Anyone can dare it. That is my request.
That was terrific. Well, Arun, thank you for that beautiful summation, and we agree you're not crazy. For the record, that was terrific. Thank you so much. Francis, how do you think about innovation, and particularly creating cultures of innovation? I loved hearing about, so often people think you're crazy when you're an innovator, or obstacles get in your way. How do you think about that part of innovation, overcoming obstacles, really stretching yourselves? How do you think about that as head of NIH?
Well, we need more crazy people, and maybe I'll speak particularly to the young crazies who are here, who we're counting on to be those innovators that are going to make a difference for the whole world. Eric Betzig was a crazy person. Probably nobody knew Eric Betzig's name until maybe this morning if you watch the news, because he just won the Nobel Prize. Eric Betzig was out of work in between postdocs or something like that when he came up with an idea about how you might take light microscope technology and actually develop a means to go beyond what was supposed to be the limit of light microscopy, which is 0.2 microns, So that's pretty bold. He was going to try to violate the laws of physics. And he approached a researcher actually in the intramural program at NIH, Jennifer Lippincott-Schwartz, and asked if maybe she would allow him to come and play with this idea. And she hooked him up with somebody who knew something about optics and engineering. And they developed the very first version of this remarkable advance in microscopy, which was recognized this morning by the awarding of the Nobel Prize. So that was pretty amazing to have this kind of boldness and to have the opportunity to explore it. I guess if I was going to say sort of 3 things about innovation, and you know, a good sermon should always have 3 points, so let's go with that. First of all, this idea of bringing disciplines together, as happened with Eric Betsick, where you have skill sets that are not identical, they are synergistic in a certain way. It's amazing what happens at those interfaces. For me, having had the privilege of leading the Human Genome Project, a lot of the excitement that happened there was technology developers coming in contact with people who knew biology and people who knew computation and seeing what would happen. Right now, we're working on a way, for instance, to try to build tissue chips that could be used for testing response to drugs, both whether they're effective and whether they're toxic. So bringing tissue engineers together with people who understand a lot about biology. I'm holding here an artificial human kidney, and here I've got an artificial human lung, all the kinds of things that are now possible, building upon stem cell biology and making these kind of gadgets happen. Very innovative. Nobody, I think, in the team that did this could have done it by themselves. They needed each other. So that's point number 1, that multidisciplinary effort. Second, and I'm sure Arun has already made this point, and Amy will make it here shortly, I would bet, is you got to figure out what are the most important problems. Where do you need the innovation? Let's not solve something that isn't really going to make that much difference anyway. And for that, particularly because we're talking about global health research, you really need to know what's the problem in the place where you're trying to develop an innovative solution. I'm fond of this story. I don't know if any of you have seen the fold scope that was put together by Manu Prakash, who basically wanted to come up with a way to make it easier for people to use microscopy in low-income countries. And he traveled to Thailand and he saw these $100,000 microscopes that had been donated by some well-intending group that were sitting in the corner because nobody knew how to use them or how to maintain them. So instead, he came up with a way of making a microscope out of folded paper and a small lens for 50 cents. And if you haven't played with one of these, they are pretty amazing what you can do. You can even project the microscope image on the wall and teach people with it. Again, he would say he never would have done that without having gone to the place where the problem was, perceived what the solution might be. Third, we've got to have an environment that supports this, that is encouraging of risk-taking, that is not telling people you got to be in a particular cookie-cutter kind of space. That's what the Grand Challenges has been all about for these 10 years, and that's what other copycat Grand Challenges, of which there are many, including some at NIH, are trying to replicate, is to create a space for that kind of innovation where you don't have to know the answer, you don't have to have preliminary data that says you've basically already done the experiment. We at NIH are pushing very hard, even in the face of tough resource constraints, to make sure that that kind of proposal is welcome. Things like the New Innovator Awards, like the Pioneer Awards, like the Early Independence Awards, the Skip the Postdoc Awards, that are encouraging people who have those ideas that you can come forward with this kind of proposal. You will be judged by other proposals like that are groundbreaking, where you don't know for sure whether it's going to work. And we intend to extend that kind of mechanism even more broadly going forward, because the experiences we're having is that actually works. And you do get a lot of really exciting data and a lot of failures. But overall, it's what we should be doing more of. And for NIH, we're going to be doing more of.
Terrific. Thank you, Francis. Amy, how do you think at MIT and at the D Lab about innovation with your unique approach?
Thanks, Sue. Yeah, so I guess I should start by, building on the being from MIT. I should admit outright that I am a nerd. I love technology. I love solving problems. I love making things. I love innovation. I love design. And I believe that innovation, technology, and design all have a big role to play in development. But I think it's important to differentiate between just the products of innovation and the process of innovation, because I think both of those have incredible potential for impact for development. And a lot of what we're doing is more about the process of innovation rather than just the products of innovation. I believe that all of us are innovators, all of us are designers. not only all of us in this room, but really all of us in this world are designers and innovators. And if we want to think about creating a culture of innovation, we need to think about what that means in terms of providing resources and support, time and space that give people the confidence and the tools that they need to be innovators. And that's a lot of the work that we're doing. We've been working in northern Uganda in the post-conflict areas now for several years to create such a culture of innovation. And I'd like to share an example of one of those technologies that was created in one of the communities where we've been working. If we could see the slide of that, thanks. So this is a technology that was created in the village of Amokolagwai. It's a small village, maybe only about 100 people live there. And the community wanted to build an oven, but they didn't have, they wanted to start a bakery, but they didn't have an oven. So they wanted to build an oven, but they didn't have bricks. And so they wanted to make bricks, but it was incredibly slow and tedious. And so what they did was they created a machine that would allow them to make bricks at a faster rate. And so here's the machine, and here are the different steps for how it works. Is you start by smearing it with water so that the mud won't stick to the block maker. And then, if I could have the next picture. And then you fill it with mud. And then after that, you smear it so that it's nice and smooth. The next one, please. And then finally, what you can do is you can turn the handle and lift up the mold, if you can move to the next slide. And you can see that you now have the blocks, and then it's specially been designed so you can just slide it back without disturbing the blocks and put in the next bit of mud to make your next group of 9 blocks. And it's much faster than the traditional method of making one at a time. And the thing that I love about this technology is, first of all, that it was 5 years after the original design training that we did in that community. So we had gone into the post-conflict areas to try to teach people how to create technologies in an effort to try to counteract the syndrome of dependency and the culture of dependency that had grown up in those camps. And so we did some simple design trainings. And 5 years later, this community is still finding ingenious ways to address problems that are getting in their way of achieving their goals. And so for me, this technology encapsulates the power of what you can do by teaching people the process of innovation rather than just sharing the product of innovation. So in my mind, we have some opportunities here in terms of creating cultures of innovation that extend not just into our universities and labs, not into just private industry, but moving further and further down the levels. And I think that there's, if we look at the grand challenges and the evolutions of how those came to be, the very first ones were very large challenges, large grants that were given to well-defined problems. I understand that although you didn't need to be a Nobel Prize winner to get one of these grants, it certainly didn't hurt. The next round of challenges, I think, were the Grand Challenge explorations. And those were much broader. They lowered the barriers significantly so that thousands of grants were given at a smaller range, but you were able to have more people engaged in that culture of innovation. I think the next round is interesting because it's looking not so much at specific problems, but looking at what's our end goal, what are we trying to do? And we're looking at human-centered design and user-centered design in that process. So we're starting to lower those barriers a bit more. And what I would encourage us to do as we continue to move forward is to look at, if this is sort of a pyramid, if we keep dusting away the sand and look at the next level and think about how can we be encouraging user-created innovation so that, that the beneficiaries of these technologies are not only consulted in the design, but they're integrated in the creation of the designs, and that through co-creation and through grassroots innovation that we see more engagement. As Francis referred to, you need to see the situation or be in the situation to create an effective solution. So I wonder whether at some point there'll be a round of grand challenges where not only are the problems created by people living in poverty, but the challenges are created by people living in poverty. And we see this type of culture of innovation being formed.
Wow,
Great.
that's great. An innovation on the grand challenges idea. Good for you. Thank you, Amy. So Bill, let me come back to you. I think this has been such a great example from our panelists about two things. One is, how much the grand challenges have inspired others. And I would think 10 years into this, that should be affirming of the concept of grand challenges. But I want to ask you about risk and learning. So it's often said that a lot of the IT world, a lot of the work that you worked on, that one of the aspects of secret sauce is the willingness to fail, to try things, to adjust, to course correct. How do you see failure and learning as part of grand challenges? And are there any pearls of wisdom you can offer the audience? Many of them are new to this. From your vision of seeing this decade of the grand challenges play out.
Well, the ideal situation is one where you get very quick feedback about what works and what doesn't work. And if you're inventing a new card game for your family, they'll tell you if they like it or they don't. If you're inventing, something to make bricks in the village, you'll kind of figure out these bricks, do they really work or not work? And so you get very quick iterations. A lot of the problems in health, unfortunately, the iteration times are pretty mind-blowing. An HIV vaccine, in terms of really understanding the human biology and what works and what doesn't work, we have 5-year cycles. Now there's a lot of talk about how, could we get that down to a year or two by picking the right cohort. The whole field wants, and inside the foundation, really I think Trevor's driven this, but is you want to move to the left in terms of trying things out and know that they fail. Now if your model is not right in terms of what those early stage things are, you might throw out some good ideas, or you might let through some things that then you go to your phase 3, and for some of our things, that's a few $100 million in 3 or 4 years, potentially wasted if those early screens misled you into thinking the thing could work. We have quite a range of things. We have disease malaria where we're allowed to do human challenges. It's easier to try out drugs and vaccines where you can do human challenges. HIV, we can't even do that. So I do think this idea of, okay, what are the screens? What are the animal models? What's the true knowledge about the science? Allowing those early screens to be a lot better. I think we're way smarter about that than we were 10 years ago. 10 years ago, we sort of thought naively, okay, let's just take the best TB vaccines and, get those out there, and it'll be like other diseases. Well, now, 10 years later, I'd say we're more daunted by the challenge of making a TB vaccine than we were 10 years ago. It's just very daunting. Fortunately, I don't feel that way about a malaria vaccine or an HIV vaccine, although you'd hope it's good you learn in that period of time. Some of our delivery interventions are more like making bricks or making sanitary napkins, where you can go out and try designs of different women's groups and see which ones really affect health-seeking behaviors, which ones persist over time, how much investment did it take to get those things going. It's wonderful if you can get that type of delivery work going on very well. So, bringing together all the different disciplines to understand how you can shorten those feedback loops, I'd say that where that's possible, that's absolutely worth doing. There are some problems that are so important to solve that even if we can't shorten it, then we just need very patient people and generous funders to keep trying.
That's great. So that looking for that rapid feedback loop is a true pearl. And Arun, maybe I can ask you to comment on that. I think you did such a beautiful job of helping us understand that it wasn't all a victory dance for you in tackling this problem. So help us understand, and particularly for people who are trying to solve problems in low resource areas as you took on, how do you think about getting that feedback loop and dealing with failure or adversity? So as Bill said, you can keep learning and adjust if you can along the way. Did you have setbacks that you can help us understand and think about how an innovator really adjusts and carries on?
Thank you for asking in diluted English. I'm a little bit afraid about on the rock English, on the rocks. So I try to innovate a low-cost sanitary pad. Actually, what I'm telling you true is for my wife. That's what happened. So I tried to do a good thing for my wife. Then it became a global fame. That's what I'm telling the gentleman here. You try to do a good thing for your wife, you also get the fame.
Okay, I'm writing that down. It's good to do things for your wife. Is that really the?
Yeah, sure.
But did you have feedback from your wife in terms of what the product attributes should be?
Yeah, this what. So it always happened on my early marriage days, almost in 1997. So the moment you get married, what is your important job? To just impress your new wife. That's what my important job on early marriage is. I try to impress my brand new wife. She's roaming around in my home. My marriage is an arranged marriage. Then I saw one day she is trying to practice an unhygiene method. She is trying to use a rag cloth. Then I get shocked, why you are adopting this unhygiene method? There is a sanitary towel in shops. Then she replied like a slapping on my cheek. I also know about that, but if I use that, then your sisters, other women at our family, we have to cut our family milk budget, she replied. Then I get shocked, what is the connection between using a sanitary towel and not buying milk for family? Then I understood it's a matter of affordability. So these are all never bother on the day. I got a chance, why not offer a sanitary pad packet as a gift to my new wife? Then I went to a shop. Even now, if you want to buy a sanitary towel, in villages in India, the only available place is drugstore. I went to the shop, the shopkeeper asking what brand you want, who knows brand and all. I just point out a beautiful color packet. What he did, he took the packet, he wrapped a old newspaper on the counter, he wrapped it, he looks left and right, he handed out me like a smuggling, a banned item. Then I get shocked, so that makes me curious, what is inside? Something I open the packet, something will jump out of the packet, I thought. Then I opened the packet at the home, I'm touching a sanitary pad in my lifetime, an 8-inch length, white color substance, a band-like substance inside the cover. I'm asking the gentleman here, how many of you ever touched sanitary pad in your life? You just raise your hand.
I don't
No
see
one
hands.
So
Arun, there's a few shy people who are slightly ready.
Only few, that what happened even in Delhi, Mumbai, or in London, France, wherever I ask, only few hands, that too they won't raise, they will raise like this. That means this is not our domain. So that's why many prime ministers of the country, they don't know about sanitary towel. Many health ministers of many countries, they don't know about sanitary towel. That's why the penetration level in my country is less than 10%. So it's all started from my family. Then what I'm seeing is a simple substance, a matter of cotton, 10 grams, wrapped with a white cloth. So I already told I am a son of a handloom weaver. That's why I'm having a rapport with yarn and cotton. I calculated maybe a 10-gram cotton, the raw material cost on 97 is mere 10 cents. But I bought it for dollars. Then I count the profit like a venture capitalist in X factor, how many X they are made it. Then I really tried, why not make a low-cost sanitary pad? This is what I thought. Then I made it my own sanitary pad in 2 days by buying the cotton web from a cotton mill, cut it into rectangle, and covered with the viscose cloth, which is used in collar and cuff and all to make stiffness. So what I bought from the shop, I made a similar napkin in 2 days. Here the problem is, I am having a small engineering workshop where I am making, I also made windows, but in iron. Okay. Then if I want to do some research in workshop, it is easy. Now I wanted to research in sanitary pad, I need women volunteer, where I can go. In India, only saints, Gurujis surrounded by hundreds of women. This Muruganantham will never get a single woman volunteer. The only available choice or victim is my wife, named Santi. Then what I did, I gift wrapped my 2 napkins. Then I selected Friday. Why I selected Friday? I don't know in my early marriage days what is happening with my partner's body. In the village, we are having a temple, women go by group. Few women will stand outside the temple, only few will enter inside. That's what I'm having a gloomy idea. Women are getting menstruation Friday. That's why I choose a Friday. I'm handovering my napkin for testing. my wife, Santi, close your eyes, Santi. Then I put the napkin. The moment you open it, she gets shocked. Oh my God, you are entering this research now. Then I ask a feedback like a fool, like giving a chocolate, eat it and give the feedback. Then she said, no, not like that. You have to wait for some time. Then only I understand menstruation is happening monthly once.
So, Arun, this is great, but I have to give the other panelists a chance.
So I'll finish it in 2 minutes.
So 1 minute warning.
It is a 14-year story. How can I compress in 3 minutes?
It's the art of storytelling. So how many prototypes did you make?
So it is a chain of failures. No one will ever tolerate. So that's more. So if you enter into innovation or research, first you will get failure. So don't expect any success. If you want to, in a fast track, you want to do something research by traveling in a business class ticket in an airplane, you can't do it. So the first you will get failures. You prepare to fail fast. So if you fail fast, you can make it the innovation very fast. So that's why in this mode, it took around 7 years to show the machine.
7 years?
So then after that also in commercialization also I got problems. I need to prove this way also you can do business, because earlier it is a macro and centralized model of doing business. This school dropout, my background is 9th standard, that too studied in a vernacular language, not in English medium. With this little knowledge, I made this macro and centralized model of doing business into micro and decentralized model of doing business, that too with the uneducated women. Now these uneducated women are buying this machine, they are making at par quality napkin with big companies, they are competing, they are able to sustain for a decade. That's make me to sit here, that's all.
So that's terrific.
Yeah.
That's great. So
I'm
yours,
sorry to take-
no apology needed. I think the curiosity that you demonstrated to keep asking questions and the stamina are both laudable. But Francis, let me ask you about this, because I think Bill made a point that I often hear from colleagues who are engineers or who have worked in IT, this fail fast and iterate and turn around. How do you think about innovation in life sciences in particular, given the lack of predictability and the lack of feedback in any time that feels realistic, to the point that Bill made? How do you deal with this in your role as a funder?
Well, it's a great question, and Bill makes the point that I think vexes all of us, that our cycle times for figuring out whether we're on the right path or are about to fall on our face are long enough that falling on your face feels particularly painful when it happens, because you've already invested an awful lot of time and oftentimes money as well. And a lot of what I think we are trying to do at NIH is to figure out ways to identify strategies to reduce that time and to give you that signal early on that this isn't going to work, so you don't keep pursuing it if it seems hopeless. These chips that I was waving a minute ago are one way of doing that, to try to figure out if you've got a compound that's actually going to be toxic to a human being. Instead of going all the way through the preclinical steps and getting your IND and doing a phase 1 trial and finding out that somebody's liver didn't do what you wanted it to, figure out a way to do that much sooner by a method that may not be perfect, but it could, in most instances anyway, give you a flag that you really want to pay attention to, and do it in a high throughput fashion so you can parallelize your analyses. Instead of putting all of your hopes and dreams in a single molecule, you could have several that you're pursuing at once. That's another way to reduce your likelihood of failure, is if you have multiple bets going at the same time. And again, if we can come up with technologies that allow that kind of higher throughput at affordable cost, that's a better way to mitigate against the risk that your one idea turned out to be a flop. But no kidding, it's still very challenging, I think, particularly for young scientists faced with the idea that failure is going to be part of your experience. I think all of us who have been through that would tell you that it hits you pretty hard, and it's hard sometimes to separate the failure of your hypothesis or the failure of your experiment from your own personal failure. You have to sort of get past that, and one of the ways to get past that is to be determined when that happens. You're not going to just put it aside and never think about it. You're going to learn from it, because inevitably there is some nugget of information that you can deduce out of a failure. I mean, look what we've done with HIV vaccines, which many people would point to as one of the most frustrating failures of the last 30 years. But we've learned a heck of a lot along the way, just to the point where now I think many of us are optimistic that we're going to get there. And I don't know that we would have said that without having all these failures to build that statement on.
So Amy, I want to change gears a little bit on the innovation front. Our co-chair Melinda Gates was up on this stage a couple of days ago talking about some of the work that she just wrote about in Science, about looking at some of the issues that we deal with through the lens of gender, with a specific focus on the importance of women and girls. You've been out in the field innovating and collaborating with others in the field to create innovations. How do you think about that concept of gender, and how does that working with women and girls impact your work on innovation?
Yeah, I think that it's a really important thing to bring up, especially in this context, because women and girls are, in the developing world, probably encouraged to use tools and to make things even less than in the United States and in other more industrialized countries. And so it's a real barrier when you're talking, especially about physical innovations, but I think throughout, right? We're talking about sort of the learning from failure, and in many ways failure is a real luxury. To be able to design, you have to have the resources to be able to expend them and not know for certain that you'll achieve something. And I think I think that there are often cases where women are, they don't consider themselves to be makers. I think the maker movement is something which is really great in terms of helping to foster grassroots innovation. And so one of the things that we specifically try to do is we try to engage women in using tools and in being comfortable using tools. And I actually have a picture from one of those communities in Uganda that I'd like to share. This was, we were putting a roof on an innovation center that we were building in one of the communities. And you can see Alice here is helping to nail the roof onto the innovation center. And what I love about this picture is that that you'll notice that she's busy at work. She's not hesitating at all. But not only that, she's not using a hammer, right? She's innovating and using an axe as a hammer. And that talks to a level of comfort with tools, which is remarkable. And I think that when you're looking at promoting innovation amongst women and girls, that you have to look at building a comfort with the tools. And in fact, we had talked to another woman in this village about the things she had gained from the training. And we asked her, if this chair was broken, would you be able to fix it? And she said, yes. And then we said, well, could you have fixed it before the training? And she said, oh no, I feared the hammer. And so in this slide, you see Alice, she's not fearing the hammer at all. And that type of thing leads to the type of innovations that women will create to solve their own needs. And the next picture I have is a picture of Wana Harusi, who's a woman who went through one of these trainings and created a palm oil extracting machine. And this is something where she was not a creator. She was not, she would not have called herself an innovator before. And she speaks very eloquently, not only about the design process and how learning these tools has enabled her to create a technology which will now bring income to her family and provide access to other things. But she also talks about how it impacted her life in other ways. And she told us, before doing this training, she hadn't danced for 30 years. And now she dances all the time and she teaches people about it. And so there's this sort of joy of innovation that I think what we need to do is we need to think very carefully about what are the building blocks that you need to put in place in order for people to view themselves as innovators and to allow them to go through that journey and for them to appreciate that failure is only failure if you don't learn from it, right? We have positive and negative results, but I don't really think that we should classify them as failures, right? And so to build that culture of resilience, to build that sort of joy in creation, I think is fundamental. And if we only do it to people who already have a comfort with tools, which are largely men, then I think we're losing out on, first of all, a huge number of innovations, but also innovations that directly impact the lives of women and girls. They are experiencing the challenge, and I think you'll see a number of, going back to the menstrual hygiene space, I think you'll see a number of innovations which are happening there by women and girls who are creating, sanitary pads for themselves or creating sanitary pads for other women because they understand that much better than men do. I mean, that's maybe an extreme example, but there are a lot of cases where engaging women and girls in innovation will, I think, give better solutions to the issues that women and girls face.
That's terrific. Thank you. Well, I'd like to just switch gears a little bit on the concept of innovation. This audience is working every day to create a space with grand challenges where innovation can tackle the world's hardest problems. But we're also very focused on engaging a broader group of people. We just heard Amy about thinking about women and girls, and broadening the scope of grand challenges is something that part of what we've been celebrating about 10 years. And part of that includes bringing young people. There's a discussion really globally about STEM education and about having enough innovators, scientists, engineers, folks who are interested in innovations, particularly in technical areas. And I'd like each of the panelists to think a little bit about their interactions with students and with education on the future of innovation, given that we're celebrating 10 years of grand challenges. And again, I'll start with you, Bill. In your work in both innovation and in education, and as a dad, how do you think about, I love the word joy, the joy of innovation, the joy of discovery that you've certainly experienced in your career. How do we pass that along to the next generation? How do you think about creating young and new innovators?
Yeah, education is actually the thing the foundation spends the second most amount of money on after global health. And there are huge challenges to make topics like math or any topics related to science, make those engaging and interesting so people don't develop the sense, oh, well, that's not for me, that's not interesting. And you get a few boys that get ahead early on who sort of intimidate everybody else.
Do you know any of those?
I certainly did. I drove many people away from math and science early on. And so people lose their curiosity. And clearly we're not making these topics as engaging as we might, because I think all of us know that the most interesting careers are where you're getting to do science or working with scientists. What are changing the rules of the game? Why is the world different now than 300 years ago? Well, the innovation is what has gotten us to this place, and it's the main hope for whatever problems particularly bother you. Sort of a recursive element of that is, when are we going to get innovation in education? And until we had charter schools, we didn't really have that much openness to trying new things out. And that's come along, and many of those experiments have done very well. Some of them have not gone well and should be ended, but a lot are pretty amazing at how they engage the kids. And if you just go into those classrooms and look at the level of energy, when they have a science topic, it'll be like, is there life elsewhere in the universe? And only giving you the amount of science that you need that might help you elucidate that problem, as opposed to a set of things that are unclear why they might be used later. I've been involved in a course called Big History, that name might mislead you, because it's actually an amalgamation of science and history, where you get an overall view of what's happened the last 14 billion years. And so by having that framework done in a very straightforward way, all the knowledge you gain in science and history, you can relate to, oh, well, that's this level of complexity. Why do we study the Egyptians? Why do we study single-celled animals? So, how does it fit? I think if you gave people a book and you never told them, okay, how long the book is, you just keep turning the page, we'll tell you when you're done. The Kindle, when it first shipped, had this feature that you didn't know, and they got lots of feedback that people wanted to know.
Want to know.
So what is the whole scope of knowledge? Do these things ever fit together, or am I the person who can't, that's too long of a desert, I'm never going to get to the water at the end, where they say, oh, this is why we taught you calculus, because we're going to take the area under that curve. Now you know why, and you need to do that, so was all very worthwhile. So yes, there's got to be, particularly using the digital tools and learning from the very best teachers, there's got to be a way that we take these things and make them far more engaging than they are right now.
That's great. So Arun, I'm sure that you're a role model for others.
Thank you.
How do you think about passing that along? You've given us some of the lessons and the pearls you've used along the way. Do others come to you for advice or counsel as to how to be a successful innovator themselves? And how do you think about teaching others to be able to do what you've accomplished?
So in my perspective, the educated people across the globe, they are using their education just as a tool to survive. There's a blunder is happening. See, I'm classifying the whole world people into three: uneducated, little educated, surplus educated. Okay, that's all, whatever you are studying. See, with a little education, if a person able to do it, so what you are going to do with the surplus education? So that's what is happening. The moment you come out from any institute, you are looking for an opportunity. That's what a stupidness happening everywhere. There is no opportunity for 8 billion people around the globe. So what I am teaching for my younger generation, where I am going for a guest lecturer, now this school dropout is a guest lecturer, including for your Harvard. I spoke in Harvard, in Stanford. So what I am teaching there, don't look for an opportunity. It is not lying anywhere in open. So now opportunities are lying in the form of problems. So took a problem, address with your surplus knowledge, come out a solution, become a solution provider. So there is a space for every citizen if you try to become a solution provider. So don't look for opportunity, don't use your education just to survive. Use your education to something transform the world, to do innovative, that's all.
That's beautifully said, thank you. So Francis, I know for sure that many young people hang on to every grant that are given out by NIH and similar things for your colleagues. Given the importance of innovation and everything you've done during your career, what advice do you give young people? How do you think about passing that along to the next generation of innovators?
Well, I do think about this a lot. If there's one thing that wakes me up in the middle of the night in the midst of what is a gloriously exciting scientific circumstance, is are we doing enough to encourage the next generation of young talents to decide this is what they want to spend their lives doing, is to come up with new discoveries, come up with strategies that nobody had thought of yet to figure out how life works and how disease occurs. What an amazing adventure. But are we doing enough to make that seem like a pathway that people would want to follow? And are we doing it in a way that's actually attractive, not just to the sort of traditional demographic, but in a much more broad-based way? Are we attracting women? Are we attracting individuals of traditionally underrepresented groups who are woefully underrepresented in the US biomedical research workforce? And that's something we have a bunch of new programs about to be introduced in the next couple of weeks to try to make this a more attractive, appealing, imaginable pathway for all the talent that's out there that right now isn't quite sure whether this is for them. And we are, once people are in this space, trying to be sure that they have the kind of encouragement to pursue ideas while you're still, not quite 60 years old yet. A lot of the problems we have in the way in which our US workforce is supported is you may not be getting your own independent research grant until you're 42. That's the average age. That's not right. We have to come up with ways to shrink that timetable for training and give people the chance to be unleashed even sooner. Finally, I would say, and this is something that I'm increasingly convinced of, if we really want to see this kind of opportunity for innovation, not just to happen in the industrialized countries, but to happen all over the world, we have to be sure that we are all invested in creating that kind of environment in places where most of the world lives. In that regard, the idea of building capacity so that over the course of time, talented individuals have in their local environment some support system, some universities that are actually increasingly strong, becomes an opportunity that's not currently being capitalized on. Programs like the Medical Education Partnership Initiative, which we're doing with PEPFAR, or like H3 Africa, which is another way of trying to build that kind of capacity. I think there's a lot more we could be doing there to encourage all of those individuals out there who have ideas, maybe have dreams, but don't at the present time have all the avenues available to them that we wish they did.
Thank you, Francis. And Amy, you're working with students every day, I imagine, either out in the fields or at home at MIT. What are the observations you would make about the ways that you encourage innovation, and how do you think about, particularly Francis's point, bringing new people in to thinking of themselves as innovators and creators?
Yeah, and thanks. I appreciate the remarks that everyone's made, and I think building off of a comment that Arun made is that I think one of the ways you bring people into wanting to innovate is to inspire them to the impact that they could make in that realm. And so I think that's one of the things that our students are constantly inspired by, is the opportunity to see the things that they create actually improve someone's life, and that's tremendous, right? And so in order to make that direct connection, I think that's what gets students involved and excited about science, technology, math, is when it's not just the equations, but it's the human factors associated with them. So that's, I think, one thing that's really important. And the other thing that I think is important within the context of innovation is sort of looking at, I guess, the different prepositions for how that works. So are you working on innovations for people living in poverty? Or are you involved in co-creation and doing innovations with people who are living in poverty? Or are you doing capacity and building to encourage innovations that are being done by people living in poverty? And I think that there's a ancient Irish blessing that ends with the phrase, "and give me the wisdom to know the difference." And I think that's maybe one of the critical things about innovation in particular, is when should you be doing it for? Because there are certain times and certain resources that we have. For example, at our academic institutions in this country, we have some unparalleled resources that you will not find in a small village in Uganda, right? And so there's definitely a place for each of those, but knowing when is each one appropriate, I think, is the challenge. And so part of our education of our students is not just about innovation, but what type of innovation and who the stakeholders of innovation are, and how they can engage as broadly as possible in creating this culture of innovation where not only themselves but others will be thriving and creating. And so I think that's the challenge, which goes beyond sort of what you might think of as sort of the more technical building blocks of innovation, but what are the philosophical building blocks as well.
Terrific, thank you. So we're nearly coming to an end, and I want to give each of our panel members the chance to wrap up with any closing comments. Anything that you want this group, this terrific group who've been focused and thinking about grand challenges, solving the world's most difficult problems with multidiscipline, multicultural, a lot of the messages we've heard with this panel, what's the most important thing you want this audience to know about innovation? We'll give each of you a chance, and I'll let you do wrap up, Amy. Bill?
Well, I think the capacity for innovation is such that we ought to have very ambitious goals about, health and nutrition, and so I'd say the more we get the innovators to travel out and see these problems, connect up with partners in the countries themselves, I think that almost is a limiting factor in how relevant all this amazing science and all these amazing tools we're going to get, is that connection and partnership with the places that are worse off.
Great. Arun?
So in my concern, if you are trying to address a problem, your solution should be definitely simple, and it should be self-evident. In ancient time, you see the water tap, if you put straight, it is open, plus close. No need a manual for the ancient tap. But even for the tap in star hotels, I am begging the receptionist to give the manual how to operate. If it touch this, hot water will pour on this. So if you give us some solution, please give a simple solution and self-evident. That's what the bottom-up pyramid people looking for. Don't give a complicated solution. Don't make the problem into further problem. That's all.
Francis?
Well, I think one theme here is if you're planning to see innovation happen, you do need to figure out who are the right partners to work with, and certainly the emphasis on working with those who are in the middle of the environment where the solution is being sought is a good one. But the other is to identify other partners who have other skills that you can make the most of. In that regard, I just want to say publicly that over the course of the last 3.5 months, the NIH has been working at an unprecedented level of partnership with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. We had a meeting in July bringing together the senior leaders of both organizations. We hammered out over the course of a couple of days ways in which we could work more closely on innovative ideas. We've iterated that one more time in a recent conference call. We have agreed to actually share information openly with each other in ways that have rarely happened between organizations of this sort. So it's one step in that direction, and again, one that I'm quite excited about and grateful to people at the Gates Foundation, particularly Trevor Mundell and Chris Wilson and Bill Gates and Melinda, for the willingness to try a model here that is really knocking down a lot of those barriers that otherwise can sometimes slow down the innovative process.
And I guess I would close with the thought that innovation is a journey and the technology is perhaps the destination. And sometimes we're so focused on the destination that we forget about what we can learn through the journey. And so I think I said before that the process of innovation is just as impactful as the products of innovation. And so I would challenge us to think about how can we engage people in that empowering process in addition to having people benefit from the technologies that come out of it at the end. So I would wrap up with that thought.
Terrific, thank you. Well, please join me in thanking this panel. I learned a lot from them. I hope you all did as well. Okay?
Okay, before I come back in a second to officially close the meeting and let you go to the cocktail hour, I want to ask Ray Yip, who is the director of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation's China office, and Madame Wu, who works with the Ministry of Science and Technology in China, to please come up to stage.
We be very short. This is almost like a handover ceremony of the Olympics, but we have no flag. But before we go there, I want to tell you a little bit about, not everybody knows that Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has a China office and China program. I want to tell you we do have one. And just like the rest of the work we do, it's built on partnership. So the Ministry of Science and Technology of China is one of a major partner in China. Our principal mission there, I can summarize as one simple sentence, which is called China for the World. We're in China there. We started a few years ago working on major infectious disease problems, such as HIV and TB for China. But we have now gradually migrated into a program trying to explore the talent, opportunities, and capabilities for innovation, for R&D, for low-cost manufacturing, for solutions and products that's good for global health. And the Ministry of Science and Technology is one of a major partner, and there is a formal partnership, and Madame Wu is the director for that partnership office based in the most. So next year, Grand Challenge Conference will be hosted in Beijing, and I would like Madame Wu to welcome you to be her guest.
Thank you. Many congratulations to the great success of the meeting 2014. And sorry. It's my pleasure here to extend our warmest invitation to you all here. Welcome to China, and we are looking forward to meeting you all at the meeting of Grand Challenges Annual 2015 in Beijing. See you then. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so this has been a really great meeting. I hope you agree. And there's a really big team of people that works like around the clock for months to put these things together. And they've been doing awesome work. So if you had a great time, I won't make them stand up, but if you had a great time at the conference, I think it'd be cool if we gave them a round of applause. And with that, let's drink.